Welcome to the podcast of the Strategy Toolbox. It's like a hitchhiker's guide through strategy. And today I have Lawrence Akpore with me. He will make his introduction himself. Lawrence and I know each other for quite some time, but we haven't really made it up to meet physically, although we basically are neighbors. Lawrence, who are you and what are you doing at Takeda?
Marcus, thanks. Thanks a lot. First of all, I would like to say thank you for bringing me on this podcast. And you're 100% correct. We've known each other for a while, 2018, through grand lean programs, through interaction here in Switzerland, in LA. And we've always
Dallas.
had the same passion for lean, agile, and those kind of systems. So again, thank you for bringing me onto this podcast. I'm glad to be. So Lawrence Akpore, I am currently the head of business excellence for our strategy and business excellence global function here in Takeda in Zurich, Switzerland, and started my career in 2020 as the head of business excellence for our site at the Thousand Oaks, California office. And then I got relocated here 3 years ago to run a global project for Takeda, involving about 28 different sites. We call it one Takeda engineering. And I've been here since then. But before that time, that's where my connection with Marcus is, as I was director of operations with Jörg Fischer, headquartered in Schaffhausen. And then it was great connecting at that point because I know you were into the lean and agile programs. You're running some really great, I remember you're running some really great workshops too as well. So that was a great connection. And before then, my background is engineering. I'm a chemical engineer. And I've walked through industry as a technical person and then going into the dark side as management. That's what I call it. When you move from technical to leadership, it's the dark side. But walked through companies like Global, General Electric. I worked in 3M. I think 3M was my longest stint professionally. I was there for 11 years. In different roles, from engineering all the way to leading multi-site manufacturing operations. So glad to be here. And as I said earlier, we live and breathe strategy, lean, agile. So excited to talk about my experience.
So before we dive into lean, agile, and strategy, you mentioned the dark side, and this is the perfect entry for me to make a quip, right? Lawrence, you made your MBA recently at a really renowned university, I might say. What on earth made you or made this way from being a Mac engineer to really the dark side and even getting an MBA at Harvard?
So first of all, it was actually a master's in organizational leadership, but it's tied to an MBA program. Okay. And I think it was because of my transition to leadership and to management. The way I've been brought up and the way I do things is great to have professional experience, like on the job, learn, but I also believe in academics, right? I believe in having that holistic part to it to say, okay, I understand the theory. Now I'm living the part. And that's one reason why I went into this program. Now, the school makes it a different thing because it's an Ivy League school. I will say it was tough getting in, but I think what I learned out of that is I have a better view of how we can view the world, how we can view businesses from different lenses. And I think that's important. It was a tough program. It was meant to be 3 years, almost 3.5. But then you're working full-time, family, everything. So you have to kind of juggle and time manage. But yes, it was really just me understanding that I needed to be a lot more theoretical, in-depth knowledge of how businesses work. And that's why I went into that field from engineering. But it's all part of, when you think about doing business courses, leadership courses, doing engineering, what you're looking for is, they call it as a search for truth, right? You're a scientist, you're a physicist, right? So the search for truth leads us to so many things, and that was one of it.
So where's truth in strategy? And maybe that's a too wide a question. You say you have this technical knowledge, so you really do understand what it means to be working on the shop floor. I know as director of ops back then that you were a hands-on guy. at the same time also needs that business acumen to really understand how business are running. So how, and now you're also responsible for strategy. So what's the magic of that mix, and how can someone working in your team or in your organization see that magic spark coming from having that engineering background plus the business acumen coming from the MBA in strategy?
Yeah. So I'll probably want to step back to explain what strategy means to me. And I'm going to use a very open term. It's not going to be technical. I look at strategy as having a game plan for achieving very big dreams, right? And big dreams means it could be anything. So it's very blue sky thinking, everything is out there. But what is important within that thinking is, how do you solve a giant puzzle where every move counts, right, and leads to a great victory? So you have this big dream, but there's so many pieces to it. And now you're trying to think, how am I going to solve this? Because you're looking at trying to outsmart challenges. You're also looking ahead while staying focused on the ultimate goal. So think about what I just said, looking ahead, but being in the present. It's contradictory, right? But that's what strategy is. Because if you don't look ahead, then you miss all the future-ready things that should be there. And then you have companies that outsmart your company. And then if you don't stay present and in the focus, then you miss the ability to get value and build value proposition from what you're doing. So you still stay relevant to look ahead, right? It's that moving puzzle and that moving pieces. So when I think about why I even moved into a role like this, and then looking at doing master's degrees around gaining knowledge, it's because of that, right? It's not enough for us in this time and age to say, okay, all the knowledge I'm going to gain around strategy will just be on the floor. It's great. Don't get me wrong. That part is integral, right? But you also have to be very ready to look at what's future ready, what's coming. So you stay relevant, you stay within the game. And I think that's where the education piece comes in as well. Now, education doesn't always have to be masters in Harvard, right?
That's true.
Doesn't have to be. There's so many ways. You can learn from people. You can learn from people that know these systems, right? So it's having an open mind to say, I want to learn what's coming, but I also want to stay in the present and use what I know to make things work. So that's how I view it. It's strategy for me is not just one piece. It's a puzzle, and sometimes as it keeps shifting. This morning, there could be a tariff announcement that affects all the import duties, and by evening, the tariff is off. You have to be dynamic, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So it's a lot of them, and that's how I see it coming together.
Your explanation makes me think about the innovator's dilemma, right? So our businesses need to create current value to their current customers, but at the same time, not miss the chance out for incorporating new technologies into new products.
Yeah.
From what you said, it almost sounds like you solved the innovator's dilemma, even though I'm not sure if that's possible. But maybe give us deep learnings from that challenge of being in the present right now and then looking ahead into the future. They say, hey, that's something where I even failed, but I learned a lesson from that failure, from maybe disbalance between the two poles.
Yeah, and I'll give a quick technical example. And you've probably heard of MRP system, so zero resource planning. And in Takeda, and I think most companies, we do it every 3 years. The plan is 3 years. Midway, we do the MYC, where you do a mid-year calibration, right? Because as I said, things are dynamic and it can change. So you may have a 3-year plan in 2028, and you say, okay, I want to get to this. But then, some things are introduced. Geopolitical movements happen. I say this openly. And plans change. You have to look at the mid-year calibration to change as well. But more importantly is, what's your value creation in the short term, right? Because that value creation or value realization is important to keep the lights going, right? Keep the lights on, keep power there so that you realize your MRP. So when I think about how I try to juggle some of this in my current role, the MRP process is the one that really opens it for me. So we have that 3-year plan. then we look at an annual refresh of our network strategy. So you think about network strategies for a pharmaceutical company. If I'm going to produce therapy A here in Thousand Oaks, California, and I need to package it in Singapore because my target patients are in Japan, right? What's the simplest way and the most cost-effective way to make this happen? Now, on the long term, my patients might not change geographically. They might still stay in Japan, right? But on the short term, because of what we're seeing with network strategy changes, geopolitical risks, right, with imports and tariffs and all that, I may have to change where I produce and where I package, right? So the short term for me is, how do I keep my value creation high so that I don't introduce extra cost, but still earn my MRP in 2028? So it's a juggling piece. But there's sometimes too where your patient focus actually moves. Maybe in 3 years, you may not have as many patients in Japan. They're now in the UK. So you keep flexing your network strategy. Where are the places where I have 28 sites, so make product or just package it? How can I move things around? It's that giant puzzle again. To make sure that on the short term, I'm getting value and I'm getting my therapies to the patients, listening to them, getting that voice of the customer, listening to them, but not failing on what I need to do in 3 years to make my MRP work.
You said you do yearly recalibration or replanning of that strategy part.
Actually, we've now changed it to every 6 months.
Because that was exactly my question. Is annual enough, or should you be doing it faster? Because you talked about geopolitical things, wherever they are in the world. We are not making any examples right now. Some of them can be foreseen, right? Months in ahead. Others simply happen.
Exactly.
And I feel more of these things happen much faster. So looking at the strategy on an annual rhythm, in my opinion, might be too slow for a company to really react on that.
Yeah.
No, but you're saying you're moving to 6 months now on that review.
Yes, Marcus, you're 100%. And that's what we've realized. Our annual strategy was really what it was annually, right? But as we started seeing some other risks, and not just geopolitical risks, some other risks around supply, some other risks around patient shift, there was a need to make it a lot more frequent. So we've gone to every 6 months. It's not biannual. And even then, I think we're even still thinking about maybe even quarterly. It's just that if you think about strategy, and you've been through those exercises, the rigor in creating a network strategy and sticking to it involves a lot of pieces, because there's sometimes where part of that rigor is really a lot of investments in equipment in the site. So doing it every 3 months, even every 6 months, when it involves that kind of rigor, could be tough, right? But it's important to still look at it.
What would need to change? And you can make an example out of your organization. These 28 sites you are transforming or supporting, that feels for me like being a network. Right? So you are leading them in a network position. What would need to adapt, change, get better to move from 6 months to 3 months to 1 month to like really short cycle adaptation?
Yeah. There's some aspects of it. And when I say the 28 months, it's this global project that I worked on, one Takeda engineering. Now, but there's some aspects of this strategy that I think you can look at a lot more frequently, potentially even monthly. And of course, there's some aspects where you just can't. I talked about the rigor of financial investments, understanding what your business benefits are, your ROI and all that stuff. There's some have to be longer planning, but some aspects of that network strategy, I think you can start looking at a monthly basis. And some of it actually comes with the biggest impact, in my opinion, is through geopolitical risks, right? And even just patient shifts as well. It might not be every month, but if you think about things that affect your supply, your materials, things that your import duties from different countries, if you see significant shifts, you have to start looking at your supply chain and understanding where those second sources will be very quickly. because as that will erode any short-term value creation you have if you don't think about it. So there's some aspects of it that we do look at and say, okay, it has to be a lot more frequent in terms of the cycle. And there's some I think has to stick to that 6 months or even every year, just because of the rigor you put in terms of investments.
And all of a sudden you not only have this high cadence, but you also have this full value stream to look out for, really end to end, from the early material you get to produce the products you make to like really deliver to the final customer in Japan or UK or wherever this might be. So this makes it even more complex.
It does.
For that.
It does.
How much is playing AI, and this is a buzzword I'm using now, right? And let's keep it general, for yourself. So how much are you using AI in your work to get this network strategy to a better place?
That's a great question, Marcus. And I don't want to say AI is still new, because it's new but old. At the same
It's
time,
new and
people
old,
people are still using it quickly too. But I will give kudos to my company first and say that's one reason why we have a whole new corporate global function called DD&T, Digital and Data and Technology. That was why it was created. And this was just a few years ago. To think about a pharmaceutical company thinking about using digital systems. But we've seen the benefit. And then I'll give you an example. If you think about LCM, life cycle management of a product, just to your point, the life cycle management code goes all the way from conception, lab development, initiation, all the way to commercialization.
Yep.
Digital systems, AI, I think, is playing a great role now. So if you think about how you accelerate to market, focus, speed, and scale, you use digital systems to help you drive that productivity. So you think about, okay, I want to focus, I have a new therapy. We want to focus on a certain area. With AI systems now, digital systems, you can easily pinpoint some of the stresses, allocations, and what the challenges are, right? Again, we know some of these systems still hallucinate, so you still have to do your homework, right? You can't totally believe what they're saying, but it creates a quicker way to get to where you want to get to.
Okay.
It also, and this is a key part of it, it also creates a quicker way for you to fail and recover. You've heard of that system, you're going to fail quick, fail fast.
Fail fast. Yeah.
And
it's one of the mantras. Yeah.
Right. That's what it's doing for us. It's saying, okay, I need to get this to market. What's that critical path? Through that LC and lifecycle management, I'll get this product out there. It maps it out for you, right? You look at the system quickly and say, okay, yes, now I know exactly which areas will make more sense. I know which areas will not make sense. We should not invest, right? But you still do your homework because it's still AI systems to still build it. But that's what we're saying, that it does help upstream, a lot more upstream than downstream.
Yeah, you are. So I'm trying to get slowly to a close, even though I could like endlessly discuss strategy with you, and we really have to make up for that. For the time. I'm hearing you using a lot of lean vocabulary that we've been using together also at George Fisher.
Yeah.
And that's my final question. And you don't have to answer if you don't want to. How often are you still on the shop floor, and how often would you like to be on the shop floor?
That's a great question, Marcus. Not as I would like to. I'm going to be honest with you. This last year, just with the role that I took, is more of a managerial executive role. But the first 2 years I came to Zurich, I really liked it because when I started with the 28th site with this global project, we had co-creation workshops in each of those sites. 5 work streams in that global project, and each of those work streams, we went to the site. And that was one of the best times of my life.
Awesome.
Just for someone that's always been on the shop floor, I started my career in a site. I've always been in a site. And as you know, when George Fisher, I was in a site, right?
Yeah.
So that was, those first 2 years here in Zurich were just amazing. I'm not saying this last year has not been. It's just a different level of excitement. But trust me, I always try to involve myself into site issues. Even sometimes they tell me, Lawrence, you're not meant to play in this space. It's just, this is not what you do. I'm like, but I have experience. I can talk about it. But pointedly to your question, not enough in this last year. I'd really want to do a lot more. Yeah.
So, dear listeners from the dark side of management, Lawrence tells us to be more on the shop floor, right?
Yeah.
Be more on the shop floor.
100%. You can quote me on that. You can quote me on
We will.
If it's
This
through
is
Gemba, if it's through whatever you want to do, be more on the shop floor. That's where Marcus, that's where the real value creation is, right?
yeah.
It's not in the ivory tower sitting down in glass buildings. It's on the floor. That's what we do.
That's where the problems happen, and that's where the problems are solved. Yeah, that's true.
Exactly.
On that note, Lawrence, it was awesome to have you on that show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. And we will make up for the years lost that you are living in Zurich and have never called me. Lawrence, have a nice one.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you very much.
For bringing me on. I really appreciate it, son. Thank you. Take care.